What's up, Bearded Tog people? Today we have a wonderful guest on the show, Kristi Odom, ambassador to Nikon. She's been featured in Rolling Stone, the Smithsonian, Rangefinder. She's a fearless photographer, and she's even been on a billboard in Times Square. She is incredible wedding photographer, but then also, I know her for her wildlife conservation work and just her heart behind passion projects of telling the stories of the things that are not so obvious to us in nature and the things that we need to care about in the world. So really, really cool episode. Without any further ado, here's Kristi Odom. So what do you like better, Kristi? Like the outdoors or sea life? I wanted to start you off with a crazy question just to make it feel crazy.
So like the underwater world or like kind of the on land outdoors? Is that kind of what you're comparing?
Sure. What's your preference or what makes you come alive?
Oh, I think I like both of them equally. I'm not really sure. My first passions really went into the oceans. I got really obsessed with marine life. And then I'd say that now it's probably a bit of both. They have such different voices to them,
Yeah, totally. And it's like different patterns and different things, not just visually, but like, going to the ocean in a certain season is going to be different the same way that photographing on land is going to be different. Very cool. So for people that don't know, like, give me a little bit more about your background and how you got started. Like, have you always been a conservation wildlife photographer? Give me the background on Kristi, with the camera, if you will.
It's a long story.
We've got time.
Oh my goodness. Well, I grew up very close to my grandfather, and when I was 18, he passed away. When I was 16, he passed away. And he left me his camera gear. So that's when I started shooting, I started playing with his camera to kind of remember him. I went to Georgia Tech for electrical engineering, so I went a completely different path. And the camera was what I started, it started consuming me more and more. I started shooting for the newspaper there and student publications. And, it was funny because I always wanted to be an engineer. That was kind of my direction. But the more I started shooting, the more I started coming out of my shell and realizing that I had a tool for my voice and a tool for my passions. And me being this like nerdy, introverted kid, I all of a sudden had something I could say, and I could say it through photography. Started shooting on the field of football games and all the parties, and I was in the center of all that was Georgia Tech, and it was absolutely beautiful. Georgia Tech let me use their name to get press to whatever I wanted for the student newspaper. And so I started calling bands, and I started saying, hey, I want to photograph your band for our 14,000 students in your target market. Are you cool with that? And I started getting a ton of press passes. I was really into music in college. All of a sudden, I was photographing things like U2 at night. And photographing U2 was, it was really hard to go back to engineering classes when you're photographing the Chili Peppers and stuff like that. So I left electrical engineering. I moved to Australia. I got a degree, a fine arts degree with a concentration in photomedia. During that time when I was in Australia, I got a contract to shoot for rollingstone.com. So I started shooting all these bands and musicians and stuff, which was absolutely fantastic. And I remember thinking, if photography's already taken me here, imagine where I can go with it. So at the end of my degree, I traveled alone around the world. It was kind of weird because flying back from Australia was really expensive at this time of year. Like a one-way ticket was crazy expensive, but a 5-continent, 1 year long around the world flight was only $400 more. So I sold my car, got some credit cards, and I traveled alone around the world for a year. Being an international student in Australia, though, I knew a lot of people in different locations. I knew a lot of the international students, so I got free places to stay in different countries and stuff like that. So that was wonderful.
Cool. I was curious. I was like, did she just bust out the credit cards and was like, let's go? Like we're burning it down, essentially.
I did. I mean, after that trip, I did end up back in Atlanta living with my parents for a long time to kind of pay off the debt from that trip. But, you know, it was really well worth it.
Sure. And I mean, it's like a lot of people, sorry to interrupt you, but like a lot of people don't have even friends in other nations or anything like that. And so like, you know, it wasn't as crazy as somebody who knew nothing and knew nobody. And it's going to go around there. Just to break in, what year is this? Like, how did you get in touch with Rolling Stone, you know, in kind of these other opportunities?
Oh, no. Okay. So when I was shooting the concerts, I would network. So when I was shooting stuff for Georgia Tech, I would network, and I met the right people, and I emailed them and wrote them letters. I wrote them letters for years before they gave me a contract. So I was just super persistent. I was super persistent about telling them what was going on in my life, what I was shooting, all that stuff. And eventually it worked. So eventually, I think everyone was really excited about Australia when I lived there, because Australia, I moved there the year they had the Olympics. So back in 2000. So people were really hyped up about Australia, and a lot of the big bands started touring Australia first. So them having somebody that had been contacting them over and over about, you know, bands they had shot, as well as, you know, like what was going on in Australia, all of a sudden they were like, yeah, no, it'd be really cool to get somebody that could photograph these tours before they made it to the States, you know? So I think it was just a lot of persistence and being in the right place at the right time, and a lot of being annoying. So I have no problems being annoying.
I mean, that's a valuable skill. Like, people don't realize it's like the worst they could say is no, you know, honestly. You know,
and they said no. They said no like 4 or 5 times. But
sure.
then they said yes. Yeah. I mean, I kind of collect rejections. I'm collecting my rejections from Nat Geo right now. I've been getting those for years. But, you know, whatever. Like, I don't know. I'll keep collecting them, and maybe one day I'll get through the cracks or something and get an assignment from them. But we'll see.
There you go. Maybe Jim Richardson will be like, all right, Kristi, come on, let's hang out. So
I got to meet at their office. I got to meet over there with the director of photography last year, which was fun. So the persistence is paying off, but it's still, yeah, whatever.
Sure. Does it feel, you know, like, it sounds to me like a lot of this was, you know, you said you were kind of just like being annoying, but on purpose, like the business version of being annoying. Has it ever felt like you haven't had to do that? Was there any season of life where it felt easy? Or has it always kind of been like, you know what, like I want to keep pushing, or, you know, we want to keep banging on that door?
I think I don't know if I enjoy failure, which might sound crazy, but like, even when I was training second shooters, I'm like, if you're not giving me something that's not working, you're not really pushing yourself. I feel embrace the fact that, like, you know, there's a success on the other side of the failure that not a lot of people get past. So I feel like constantly pushing myself to do something and to fail at something every single year means that I'm pushing myself in a direction where other people aren't going. So I mean, the stuff on my calendar right now to do, it's a lot of rejection that's going to be coming out of it, but I'm ready for it because it means I'm pushing myself to new territories.
Sure. That's crazy. So post Kristi Odom World Tour, what were the next few steps for you? Because I've met you in DC, like, you know, and at least the mindset I got was like, oh, Kristi photographs weddings. And then like, that was kind of true, but then there's so much more behind it. And so, you know, post World Tour, what was life like for you?
Yeah, well, I ended up back in Atlanta, and when I traveled around the world, I got really fascinated by people's connections with nature and wildlife, and I photographed a lot of animals, and I got really close to, you know, photographing just different projects and seeing things that needed to happen, you know, starting with orangutans in Borneo, and you know, continuing traveling on to South America and the Galapagos. And when I came back to Atlanta, Georgia Tech actually had kept up with me, and Georgia Tech had a show for me. And they had a show, it was called 6 Continents, a Girl on a Camera, where I got to lecture and tell my travel stories and talk about my adventures. And this was back in 2005. I had a girl come and see my show, and she asked me to shoot her wedding. I'm like, sure, I'll shoot your wedding. So I went and I photographed her wedding. I was shooting all film back then, and I remember making prints for her. I called her over to my house, and I had her prints on my dining room table for her to see. And when she came in and picked up the prints, she like started crying because she, got really back into that moment. And I don't think she was expecting to feel those emotions she had on her wedding day again. So she was really, it was a beautiful gift in the fact that I realized that I could shoot a day that really mattered to other people, and I could give them these emotions back, and I could use my art to mean something to somebody. Like I'd never really made somebody cry through my nature stuff or through my rollingstone.com stuff. Like it was all like being able to get somebody to get so emotional over my work made me really excited. And that's what, that was 400 weddings ago and many years ago. So I've been doing weddings ever since. And I actually really love shooting weddings. So that's, I kept doing the nature stuff. The nature stuff is, when I get to kind of tell my own story, when I get to go and, I feel very connected to the world. I love Aristotle's quote, in all things of nature, there's something of the marvelous. And I love being able to use my photography to show what I love in the world. And when I shoot weddings is when I get to tell my clients' stories. It's when I get to show their love for each other and their love for their family. And so I think that it all comes hand in hand. And I wouldn't say one part is a bigger part of my life than the other. I would say that, the weddings do fund the conservation work. It gives me the ability to travel to different destinations and fund myself as an artist and be able to shoot a lot of animals. So that's kind of how they play with each other,
Yeah, totally. Now, like, how were you, back in Atlanta, if you will, like how are you getting those, wildlife or conservation gigs? Like, did you go to the zoo essentially and you photographed some awesome stuff? And then you're like, listen, everybody, like, please hire me. This is my photo of my orangutan, or like, what is that kind of that process like?
Well, at the end of the day, most conservation organizations, like, they need cash flow. So a lot of it is me funding trips to go out and photograph at different destinations, and then selling prints to raise funds for conservation. So it's partnering up with different organizations that need help, like the wildlife parks or African wildlife, and actually like doing fundraisers and bringing photo community together. So I wouldn't say like I'm getting, like projects are hired by these conservation organizations, but I'm using my art to raise awareness and to sell imagery to donate cash to them.
Sure. And is that just like I've done this before with other nonprofits. It's kind of like a partnership essentially. And you're like, hey, if you can make sure that I have a place to stay when we're there, or somebody who can at least like guide me through this country I've never been in before, then I'll help out as much as I can. And then also hopefully we'll make some amazing images if we see these animals.
The partnership kind of comes afterwards. So I find a project or something I'm passionate about and I go out and photograph it. And then I raise funds and donate cash. So a lot of it is, me donating money. It's not going out there for a different organization. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit more, at the end of the day, these guys have a lot of stuff going on. Like these guys have a ton of stuff going on. So it's one of those things. It's like I give them value without, at the end of the process, if that makes sense.
Sure. So, most of these trips are, not just self-funded, but like self-produced, essentially. You say, all right, I'm going to go to X country and try to get photos of this particular thing that highlight this particular thing, and then raise money specifically for that organization.
Sometimes. So, how it kind of started was the wedding business started taking me to different destinations all around the world. So like I'd photograph a wedding in Thailand, and then I'd jump over to Borneo and take photographs of primates. Or I would photograph a wedding in Australia and I'd go to South Australia and photograph the sea lions. So the different weddings were kind of funding me to go to different locations, and I'd find animals that I was passionate about around those locations. And then either sell the work, or sometimes I even would go on and get my trips crowdsourced. So I'd pre-sell images of projects and, fundraise that way for different conservation organizations. But I think recently I've been working more for bringing community together. So bringing community together at breweries, bringing artists together, bringing different donors together and doing auctions and raising funds that way. So it's like a big group of people that come together. I've been working with the Fearless charity dinners for the last couple of years, where we have a whole bunch of fearless photographers get together and we fundraise for different organizations that way. So a lot of it is more community driven now. So it's getting more people involved so that more people become part of different projects that are making difference.
Totally. Is there, even shooting weddings, is there opportunity? Do you see potential for, that to not be as much of what you do? Like, is the pie chart shifting of responsibilities for you in the coming future? Do you want it to, or do you like it where it is now?
I'm pretty happy where it is now. I think I would be sad if I gave up weddings, because weddings, in a way, like, it's just such a beautiful day in somebody's life that I do love shooting weddings. I don't like it to totally consume me, so I like having about 15 wedding clients a year, and that's about where I max out. So I think in the future, moving towards maybe having only 10 clients a year and then doing more education, more conservation, more helping photographers do their own personal projects and do things that they can make their own changes. So I want to do a little bit more of educating and pushing other people to make change. We've also opened up a branch of our company. We're starting to do international workshops. So we're going to take people out in the field where they can kind of experience, may it be bears or gorillas or something in the wild, and teach them how to document that so that they can have that experience where they're, having these life-changing moments, but also receiving education at the same time. And we just, it looks like we just sold out our first workshop, which is out in Alaska to photograph bears. We just sold it out, looks like yesterday, which I'm pretty excited about. And our next one will be in Kenya at the beginning of next year. So it'll be more of a, chance to educate, give people a life-changing experience, as well as give them tools to, find out what they're passionate about, become stronger photographers, and love this world a little bit more.
Sure. That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, congratulations on selling out that first one.
Thank you.
That's super cool. I asked that question just about, how would you divide the work that you're looking for, and kind of like, I find that shifts differently for everybody, sometimes even year to year. Especially if you either love one main thing, but then something else becomes this like passion, and it grows because we're already good at like pursuing a passion because we did the first time. And so you find these other things. But like, I think I read a quote, maybe it was on your site or somewhere, and it was like, I connect better with animals than people. And so I was like, I was curious to ask, like, what part of that workload was going to take precedence? Like, hey, when are animals going to start, like paying Kristi's salary?
Oh, goodness. Well, what's funny is, like, it would be really nice. Like, I'm kind of back and forth on that a little bit, because it would be really nice to make a little bit more income with the nature photography. But at the same time, like, me working for myself, doing self-directed projects means that I'm my own boss and my own voice, and I can shoot wildlife exactly how I want to shoot it. I have no editor or deadline or anything. It's really about the experience, and it's about my viewpoints. So it gives me unlimited potential to do nature fine art as opposed to nature journalism, which I love. Like, I love being able to kind of push the limits a little bit and really get into how I'm feeling about things. So I love that the projects are all 100% mine in a way, which I think is where my voice and my style really comes out. Because if I had an editor that was trying to get so much story, that I may not be able to shoot it as abstract as I do. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think that, I'm pretty happy right now having the wedding photography, kind of fund the nature stuff. And, hopefully in the future, the education stuff will help fund a little bit of the nature stuff as well, with the workshops and stuff. I spent when I moved back to Atlanta after I traveled around the world, I worked at a travel agency for a couple of years. So I became really obsessed with putting together trips and putting together itineraries, which is why I think this international workshop thing is going to be awesome. Like, it's one of those things. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to kind of like put together these really cool trips for people. And so being able to do that and have an education spin and stuff is going to be, so I'm hoping that that'll, bring in a little bit more income in the upcoming years.
Yeah. I mean, I see no reason why not. I mean, like, one, I feel like in the industry, in the wildlife conservation industry, one, you're a lady, which there are not many of. And then two, like you are younger than most of them, at least the ones that I'm aware of, even shooting through some of my clients, my conservation clients. And it's like, and your work is awesome. So, it's like I don't know, to me, I feel like you and like Anand Varma are like the new school of, just the conservation or wildlife or just, science rather. And so, yeah, I see no reason why you can't just have like a workshop every month and just travel the world and shoot.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, totally. So I want to dive into these self-funded trips a little bit more. Just one, because I think it's really cool. Two, I think when people listen to this and even myself, people don't realize like that's probably not, until you're out there with your hand on the camera, it's probably not the most fun process, or or maybe it's not like the most glamorous, because somebody's not saying, hey, Kristi, we'd like you to come out. Like you're doing it yourself out of your own passion and hoping, one, to create good work and to showcase the cause, and then like your desire for an organization to be connected is like so far down the line of steps, whereas most people think of like, hey, Kristi, we'd like you to come to Tanzania and photograph XYZ. And so what is that like, are you pick a country or an animal, like walk me through the very basics of that process for you. Like a lot of the animals, when I think of photographing wildlife, I'm like, oh, are they endangered? Does Kristi have to get like some kind of clearance, or because she goes alone, can things be a little bit more open? So walk me through a little bit more of like the nitty gritty of that process.
It's such a hard question because it's so varied depending on what's going on in my life at that time. Like the weddings tend to open up certain months for travel. So I tend to try to find places that are, good to travel at the times of year that I'm open. But I'm trying to think, like, it's just so different each time. Like I have a friend down in Charlottesville that's helped set me up with fixers sometimes, which are, people on land in the area that help photographers get connected with what they want to photograph. So, I mean, the community is just fantastic, and asking for help has always been something that's opened a lot of doors for me. So it's one of those things that's like every trip is kind of different. I think recently I've been really pushing photographing primates. So I've been working in Sumatra and Bolivia and different places to kind of like, kind of see what's going on with primates that have been affected by deforestation. So, I've been doing a lot of research, and I'm hoping to get out to Liberia next year to kind of continue on that journey of showing the emotional response and the emotional toll that primates kind of go through when they have come out of being trafficked and have come out of being pulled out of the wild. Because for every primate that ends up out of the wild for animal trafficking, on average, 9 mothers have been killed because they shoot the moms, and when the moms fall from the trees, they pull the babies out of the mom's arms, and so that's how they get monkeys into animal trafficking. And these are animals that share 96 to 98% of our DNA. So there's a lot of emotional trauma that they go through, and I think that that's a story that hasn't really been told, is that emotional rehabilitation of people that help them after they've been pulled out of animal trafficking. So that's one thing that I think photographing weddings for so many years, I've learned that, you photograph for emotion, and that's what gets people hooked. And so looking at different animals around the world, you can see that they have emotion based on body language and gestures and the way they interact and put their hand on each other. They're highly emotional beings that aren't emotional in the same way we are. So that's one of the things that I've been kind of pushing, is that the animals, that you can really see their emotion through body language, and using my skills as a wedding photographer to capture those emotions without them saying a word,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of like the wedding photographer or anybody who just photographs people in kind of a more intense way. Not that family portraits are bad or something like that, but like, weddings are kind of, we're trying to create something. And yeah, you're totally right. Is, a lot of your images have the eyes of the animals in there, and like, because those are windows to the soul, and like there's a lot of emotion there, whether it's implied or actual, and it's like there's so much more. It's not even about like gear anymore. Like that's like the most, I talk with a lot of photographers all the time where I'm like, that's the most boring conversation now, because you could talk to Kristi about like communication with an animal and like the emotion of us reading an image, and then what's the animal feeling when that image was taken. Like just crazy stuff. So does that look like, the trying to think of the process, but are you land in your place and maybe you have a fixer and you're like, all right, we are looking for this particular animal. And then does it depend on the trip? Are you hiking in? Are you camping? Are you, roughing it? What's going on? Does it depend on the trip?
It does depend on the trip. It, very much depends on the trip. Like when you're out in, Kenya and stuff, you just hire a guide and a car and a driver and make sure you've got somebody to yourself and somebody that's willing to help you get out there at the right time when the light's nice and stuff like that. Others is pairing with different organizations that are doing conservation stuff. Like the project that I'm hoping to do, I'm working with some people in Liberia that are helping chimps that have come out of trafficking. So it's establishing a relationship and hopefully seeing if that can lead to a project out there. So things like that, like every shoot's kind of different. Like the underwater stuff, I've done the liveaboards where you stay on boats and you go out and go to different locations. Like one of my favorite places is the Galapagos, and I like flying down to the Galapagos and staying on the islands and taking day trips, either out scuba diving or photographing the animals that are all around the land there. Like it's absolutely phenomenal down there. So I think a lot of it's just, the thing is that, it's really hard to put the nature stuff for me is my art. Like it's where I try to be a fine artist. And I find with that in my own style of creating art, there's not a lot of structure. Sometimes it is going to a location and being inspired. Sometimes it is going where the animals are and then being inspired by that. So a lot of times there is some camping involved, but the majority of the time, with all the equipment and stuff, I stay in lodges, I hire drivers and stuff like that. So
sure. Has there ever been a trip that you self-funded where you came back not necessarily having what you hoped you would get?
No, I don't. I think anytime that you're out traveling and with the world, there's never disappointment. So there's always some enrichment in some way, shape, or form. So I don't think I can't remember any disappointing trips. Oh, that sounds weird.
Like, was there a trip where you're like, all right, I have to come back because I want to make, a different photo of this particular animal or something? I'll give you an example. So, January 2016, I went to Iceland for the first time with a few people, not for wildlife. They don't have much, other than the aquatic variety. And it was awesome. It was great. But or maybe it wasn't January, it was May, and the northern lights weren't out. So it was just bright sun all day. The sun set at 11 p.m. and then rose at 2 p.m. And I was like, this is great, but I really wish that I had gotten, some photos of the northern lights, or kind of like what's life like in a country that's dark the entire time, for 5 months. So that's what I was kind of thinking is like, but then again, you planned so well that you probably already knew before you went in. Whereas for me, I was like, oh, this is not exactly what I need.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I think being the travel agent like kind of helped a little bit. Like when I tend to set myself up for multiple opportunities for things that I'm looking for, like photographing the gorillas in Uganda. Like when I go out, I buy multiple days of gorilla trekking. So I don't just go out and I remember the first day I went out gorilla trekking, like the gorillas were way off in the trees and you barely got to see them or experiencing them, but you could see them off in the distance. And then the second day I went, they were, nursing babies right at our feet, like it was a totally life-changing experience. But having, spent the money to do 2 days of it was definitely worthwhile. So I tend to, I can't remember ever really being, I do find locations where I want to go back, like this Alaska thing. I went out to Brooks Falls last year, beginning of July, and it was the very beginning of the salmon run. So we would see like one bear and then it would go away, and then, it would be a long time before another one came out. And everyone was like, oh, well, the salmons are just starting to run, so you got to come mid-July. So this year we're going July 17th, and that's the whole workshop thing. We're bringing 4 students out. So we got the most prime week for the salmon and the bear viewing.
Yeah.
Which we're super stoked about. So I think that things that usually, it's like sometimes I'm like, I want to go back. I want to see this in a different experience. Like when we went out to Kenya last year, we went in November. We went during the rainy season. So prices were way down. Tourists were way down. I've done Kenyan safaris where you see more wildlife. But at the same time, it being off season, there were a lot of, things I didn't expect. And it was a different experience. Like we got to see animals in the rain. We got to see animals jumping out of like the bush when there's, we got to see a lot of the greenery and the lush that you're not used to seeing. And we would see a lion and there wouldn't be 20 vehicles around us. We'd be able to sit with it alone for an hour, which was a totally different experience than when you go out to Kenya during high season. So I feel like as much as like there were less animals, it was almost a richer experience for us. A lot of the animals had babies that time of year, which they don't really have at a time when the migration happens. So it was I find that sometimes while it be a different experience, it's always been an enriching experience.
Sure. Is that a real thing? Like not like people go on safaris, is there really, 20 vehicles? Is it really kind of this like, when I picture it and I see it in different photos, you think like, maybe 1 or 2 vehicles and we're kind of like going through, but are there times when it's really just this like commercialized vibe, if you will?
Yeah, if you go out to the Masai Mara during the migration, you'll see a sighting and there'll be like 40 vehicles. Like it's ridiculous.
What?
So it's very, there's a lot of people, which is great. I mean, it brings a lot of money into the wildlife parks. A lot of people get to experience wildlife in the wild. Like, I think it's a beautiful thing that there's a ton of people out there. But for me as a photographer that wants an experience and a deeper experience with the animals, like it's nice to go out when the tourists aren't there.
Sure. I mean, the difference there is just intimacy, like there's a relationship that you're, trying to form and a feeling that's happening versus, all these trucks are here and it's going to be a little bit different. Yeah, that's interesting. I was just curious because I've been to Africa, but not for wildlife reasons, and was always just curious. Obviously I would love to do that someday, but I was like, is there really 20 vehicles? And, I could see it being like a bus tour almost, where they're like, all right, we're going to go to our next stop and we're going to hope for something. And, it's just this loud, truck coming in and, but as you don't sound as tore up about it as I thought you would. So for the tourism aspect, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess it's not that bad.
Well, at the end of the day, people are going to want to conserve what they love. And the more people that get to experience wildlife, it's a great thing, because I have very conflicting views about zoos, because while it does give the animals, it gives people those experience with animals, it's a very, sometimes it's not the best conditions for the animals to be in themselves and how they got there in the first place. Like, were they pulled from the wild? Were they bred in captivity? So there's all sorts of questions that come up around zoos, and some zoos are completely ethical and beautiful, and some are just not. So it's one of those things that's like, if people are out in the wild and having those experiences where they're getting to see the way that the wildebeest migrate and the lions follow them, like that's going to make more people love the outdoors, which is going to make more people want to conserve and actually care about it. So I'm all about tourism in the outdoors, which I know a lot of conservationists are a little bit less about it. Like they kind of want more, they want less of people to be able to interact, because but at the end of the day, I think, nature needs our help. Wildlife needs our help. And, we get more people to love and care about wildlife, the more people are going to give.
Sure. Absolutely. It's funny, like, also, like you talked about with zoos and just the perspective So I used to have the National Zoo here in DC as a client of mine, and which was crazy. I have no idea how a bearded wedding photographer got this job, who is not like, I don't have conservation or anything in my anything, but it worked out, and it was a great experience for a year. And but just the perspective, like one of the elephants would get arthritis shots every day, and they were caring for her and making sure she was okay. But in order to like move her legs into the spot they needed, they had like these almost like shackles like around her first set of legs that they used to like hold her in place when they give her their shot that would help her not be in pain. But she would just walk around with the shackles on her front 2 feet, like around the area, and people were like so freaked out at first glance. And you know, I don't necessarily have like a dog in that fight, but part of me is like, no, but if you only knew, like, you know, she's just a big girl. She's 10,000 pounds, and this is how they help her get her medication. At least that was my perspective. But yeah, it's like more knowledge and more education, and finding, you know, and people are outraged because they love the elephant, you know, or they hope that elephant is well. And so, yeah, you thank you for putting a good spin on, not even a good spin, but like giving your perspective on that like, if people love the outdoors more than even the guy that like goes to Africa and comes back and he's like, you know what, I'm going to pay more attention to recycling.
Exactly. Or, you know, I mean, elephants are in dire need right now because of all the, you know, hunting for ivory. So it's one of those things that, like, if people get if they get to experience what an elephant, you know, how magnificent they are, then hopefully they'll pay more attention to what's going on right now.
Yeah.
What's going on with the ivory trade and stuff like that, because they'll realize that these animals do need to not be hunted for their tusks.
Totally. Absolutely. It's so crazy. Like, I only got a sliver of it, but my first project was, and what's funny is I can share these photos with you privately, but I can't share them online, is, you know, they said, Adam, your first project is, we want to do portraits of all 6 of our elephants, you know, kind of like not yearbook photos per se, but we want to like have these kind of storytelling portraits that like show their personalities. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, there was no way I'm the guy for this job at all. But kind of like you said, even in a small situation like that, you know, where, you know, we got to be in a place where the general public wasn't, and we did it at a time when there weren't a lot of people around. It was just the keepers and myself. And they also too, like, we had a few days of kind of like transition where I wouldn't come in there with the camera. Like, we would just get to know the elephants and like, you know, literally talk to them. And at first I was like, this feels weird and please don't hurt me. But they got to know their personalities and their names, and kind of crazy. Like, you would start playing with their trunks and start kind of like trying to lick the lens, of course. And, and just like, and then I also got to learn more about them. And, you know, something like they have 100,000 muscles in their trunk, which is insane. And they can like twirl a blade of grass and pick it up, but also like destroy something with their trunk. Just like this, the range of mastery that they have. And we're totally going off topic and just geeking out about elephants, but this is just so cool. And so, like, you know, my wife asked, like, how was your day? And I was like, well, let me tell you about this, you know, situation with the elephants.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, like, I was born in a small town, so any photography opportunity, I always feel like I'm kind of like a fish out of water, and just like, I'm grateful for all of this. But that was one of those opportunities where I was like, what? You want me to take portraits of the elephants, and also too, just like learning the difference between Southeast Asian elephants and African elephants, and like, you know, African elephants, and I'm like using very like basic terms, but like African elephants are usually larger and are like, as children in America, what we usually see in cartoons and stuff like that. And so it was just a really fun experience. That was like my one sliver of Kristi Odom life there.
That sounds like a great shoot. That would have been, they definitely have big personality. Elephants, you know, they celebrate life and they mourn death. Like, they're very intelligent animals. So shooting for their personalities would have been really cool. Yeah,
no, it's crazy. And too, like, they had, what did they have like all these puzzles for them and all kinds of things like out in the range, and just watching them like not just, oh, the animal is playing with a box. Like, no, like this animal is doing something that we're getting a privilege to see. So anyway, that was kind of a tangent for both of us, but thank you for sharing that. So I want to tell, like, through all this process, you know, like what's one or two of like your aha moments, or what was something for you that you were like, okay, I'm going to change this process and how I do this, or, you know, your perspective has changed forever. Like, what is one of those aha moments for you?
You mean like in photography and wildlife and, you know, I mean,
anything.
I guess one of the things was, you know, when I photographed U2 back, speaking at the concert stuff, like, I think that was the moment that I decided to leave engineering. And it was like Bono kind of picked me out of the pit, and he put his eyeball in my camera lens, and all these people are like yelling behind me. And I just remember thinking that if photography's taken me here, imagine where I can go.
Yeah.
You know, the whole job of being a photographer is to have high experiences and to go to unique places and to capture people having the best day or the best moment in their lives, you know, and to be able to be a witness to such big things it's a gift to be a photographer. And I remember that's when I knew that I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. I wanted to see where photography led, you know? So I think that was one of my first aha moments with photography.
I love that. And then kind of counteracting that, what's been your biggest struggle in all of this?
Biggest struggle, you know, honestly, my biggest struggle is I'm not very good at pushing sales and making money. That's always my biggest struggle. I love the art of it. I love the craft of it. I love the emotion of it, but I'm not a business salesperson as much as, you know, I should be. So that's where, you know, it's nice because, you know, when I make big sales, sometimes I'm like, you know, I've never been good with talking about money or, you know, approaching the subject of money with other people. So that's where my struggle has been, is that, like, especially with my art and my nature stuff, like,
sure,
how do I put a price tag on something? How do I put, you know, I'm not very good at upselling my clients' wedding albums and wall art and stuff like that. You know, they come to me for that stuff, but I feel like I could be a much better business person.
Totally.
So that's my biggest struggle, is sometimes I wish I just had somebody that could handle numbers for me.
Yeah, totally.
All that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, you know, I wonder, a lot of photographers, once they get into kind of your realm, not just for weddings, like they have like their front office person or their business person, which obviously you need money to hire, but it's probably one of those, like, you know, chicken egg situations. So
well, I run the company with my partner and my boyfriend and guy I've been with for a while now, and we run everything together, but we both are really passionate about the art and really passionate about, you know, he's a lot more passionate about the wildlife and getting people outside and the workshops and you know, like the wedding passion is more my side, but neither of us are big salespeople, I think, at the end of the day.
Sure.
Yeah, it's, I'm not very good at making sales on my albums and stuff, which I love album design. That's the weird thing, is it's like I've won awards for my album designs, and it's one of my big passions, is playing images together and letting them kind of see how they work together and see how the story unfolds by order and layout and working imagery together. And I never thought that I would love albums as much as I do, but I received a gift from one of my sponsors a few years back, which was a fine art album on my nature stuff. And I got to start playing with the images together. I work closely with Fundy over at Fundy Software. I absolutely love them. So he was the one that encouraged me to make my first album of my nature work. And that ended up winning an award at WPPI. And since then, I've started entering wedding albums into competitions, and I've been winning awards with that. And I've been, you know, even playing with my nature stuff together in a book format. And it's been it's brought in kind of the work to a new level, which I've been really enjoying doing. So it's one of those things where I'm like, I really wish I could show people more about what could happen after their wedding and how awesome of a story it can be kind of put together when the images play with one another. Because at the end of the day, the final product is in the print, it's in the album, it's in what people can hold. Like photography is kind of moving into this, well, it has for a while, into this digital era, but I feel like photographs have to breathe. I feel like they have to be printed.
It's just like music. Like music is there's a quote that says music is the space between the notes. And so like if you see a gallery of 1,000 images all at once, it's not the same as seeing, one image at a time, or even like, all right, here's 12 curated images from that day. And you're like, whoa, it's a much different experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. So last thing, just for fun, because you were talking about sponsorships and awards, and I just look up to you as like, I don't know if big sister is the right term, but like, you're like the queen in our area and in our industry. And so you recently became a Nikon ambassador, right?
Yes.
So what is that like? And you're already shooting Nikon, and like I shoot Nikon as well, and we love that. Like, what is that like?
Oh gosh, this was my life dream, is to be a Nikon ambassador. Nikon has 33 people that they've recognized as the people that are really making change with camera, really inspiring photo community, really pushing the bounds of photography. And to be put on that list by Nikon is one of the biggest honors of my life. It is probably the biggest honor of my life. So it means that I get to do a lot more working with other photographers, a lot more education, a lot more inspiring people to do their own projects and their own things, which makes me really excited. And it also means that, it means that I've got, support from an amazing team of people to be able to produce the artwork that I want to produce with my cameras. So it's a big accomplishment for me that I'm really excited about. And I can't wait to kind of see what the upcoming years bring.
That's really cool. Well, Kristi, thanks so much. What's one thing that you wish people, photographers, or just in general, what's one thing that you wish that they knew, whether about wildlife conservation, or like, what's that one thing you need to leave people with?
The camera is really a tool to show who you are, what you feel, what you see, what you experience. And the more you can use your camera to speak loudly about your passions in life, the more you're going to get people to love your work and love what you love.
Awesome. Kristi, where can people go to find your work?
Oh, friend me on Facebook, Instagram. It's Kristi Odom on both of those, or, my website. But I've been hitting up Instagram a lot recently. So that's a great place. It's just Kristi Odom, KristiOdom. Instagram / Kristi Odom. So it's a pretty easy handle.
That's right. It's not backslash though. Everybody always says
backslash.
Sorry.
Whatever.
It's leaning forward. So I always like messing with people on that.
Okay. Well, so maybe it isn't that easy to find me, but yeah, no,
we'll make it happen, and we'll link it in the show notes too. So if in somebody's podcast player, they can pull it up and it'll add you. So thanks for coming on, and seriously, hope to have you on again, and let us know how the Alaska workshop goes and when Kenya, hopefully, registration opens. Okay, sounds good. Will do, and thank you again. I appreciate it. Very cool. I love having Kristi on because she's, I've known her for years now, and she's just one of those people where she's pursuing her passion and going after it. And that passion isn't necessarily just the main breadwinning photography. It's also, a passion project of hers. And so I love that. That's super cool. I always tell people that they should have a hobby outside of their bread and butter. But sometimes that hobby is no longer a hobby. It's a passion, and it becomes this enveloping force. So thanks so much for listening to the Bearded Tog, everybody. Definitely leave us a review on iTunes. I would love to see it and know what your thoughts are. It really, really, really helps the show. Otherwise, have a great day. Keep being awesome. Thanks so much, guys.